absolutely to Soweto. They also have the Orlando Stadium, which they're very, very proud of indeed. That's been used for training for many of the teams who've arrived in South Africa. Tonight, that is the venue for the FIFA kickoff concert. The roads around the area are absolutely jammed, but they're underway there now. Shakira, who sings the official theme song, Shakira from Colombia, is performing. Alicia Keys is there. The Black Eyed Peas are going on stage in around about 15 minutes. So their own Orlando Stadium is absolutely full. They're having to deal with a biting wind. Gloves and earmuffs, I think, very much in evidence in that stadium. But the concert is underway, and Soweto's World Cup, as much as South Africa's World Cup, getting underway as well in the next few hours.
Thank you, Russell. We hope to pop in on the concert in a moment or two. Graham Taylor is with us, and Mark Gleeson, South African journalist. Mark, now we're learning Vuvuzela. We've learned about Makaraba and Calabash as well, because the Calabash is, will you tell us exactly what it is? And that is what Soccer City is based upon, the stadium.
Calabash is a traditional African pot used obviously for cooking, for mining, grilling maize to make traditional inkomkoti, as they call it, which is a beer, a wonderful beer, which one or two of those and you're pretty much gone for the next 48 hours. And the stadium has been covered. It was a little bit of a late addition to the plans. You know, Soccer City was a 75,000 seater when it was first built in 1988. You know, one of the biggest stadiums on the African continent, hosted the Nations Cup in 1996. And the initial plan was just to sort of finish one of the side stands which hadn't been completed and make it sort of a round oval. And it was only fairly late in the process that they decided on this Calabash. And across all of the venues, they've tried to make something iconically South African. In Nelspruit, for example, there are 4 giraffes. The stanchions outside holding up the stadium look like giraffes. In Polokwane, they look a little bit like baobab trees there. Some of the seats, for example, in Nelspruit are in the pattern of a zebra. So the stadiums really are iconic. I mean, I think people in this country have been absolutely blown away over the last years. They've been opened up steadily, just how good these venues are, and how much thought has gone into them. I think there were a lot of skeptics going into the construction of this, but I think that's going to be one of the main overriding memories for visitors of the World Cup is how good these venues are.
And as you say, there's a real African feel to them, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Back, though, to this concert at the Orlando Stadium. The Black Eyed Peas are on stage. You can see highlights on BBC Two from 9:30. Here they are. The Black Eyed Peas, and the BBC's Ben Brown is outside the stadium in a fans' park. Ben, how is it there?
Yeah, it's an absolutely incredible atmosphere, actually, Mark. Thank you very much. And it's a freezing cold night, I have to say. Absolutely perishing. So any England fans still to make the journey out here, I'd advise you to bring lots and lots of warm clothes for the evenings, because as soon as the sun goes down, it's perishing. A few vuvuzelas around me, as you can hear. They're running out of puff a little bit, but they're doing their best. We're just outside the Orlando Stadium, actually, where that concert's just got underway. And we're with some of the Soweto people who can't afford tickets, because the tickets are pretty pricey, up to £125 each. So some of the Sowetans have been watching it on a big screen here where we are, just outside the stadium, but unfortunately they've had a power cut. So now the big screen's gone completely black, they can't see a thing. It's very cold, but they're still making the best of it, blowing their vuvuzelas as you would expect.
Ben, thank you. So 9:30 BBC Two if you want to watch highlights. Gus Stewart says, Mark, I'm spoilt for choice. 31 teams from which to choose. Gus Stewart, I wonder where he comes from and which team he's left out of that. If I was looking for value, I'd go for Messi and company. Enjoy your stay. I know, Gus. 47 years old, 2 teenage kids, but I'm looking forward to this World Cup as much as ever. Am I normal? I think you are. It's England all the way. 7 matches, 7 1-0 wins. We can do it, says Paul from Essex. And Chappie in Leeds says, cannot wait for the World Cup to start. I feel that England can win and look forward to all nations playing good football. And on Twitter, Vicar Dave says, I've recently moved to Cape Town from London. The buzz on the ground in the poorer communities I live in and connect is amazing. Mark, let's just finish off that chat about Soccer City, because it's got this membrane around the outside, hasn't it? This sort of orange and brown membrane, as well. As you say, the tunnel, I think, I mean, Johannesburg is all a big mining area, isn't it? The tunnel they've designed on a sort of, or there's an homage to sort of the mining community as well, isn't there? As you say, say, everywhere you turn there seems to be a nod to history somewhere.
Yes, indeed, and the other thing that they've done in their stadium is that they've got black stripes which point in the exact direction of all the venues of all the previous World Cup finals. So when I don't presume those watching back in the UK will see the stadium empty at any stage when they turn on their tellies, but if there's ever a chance and you do see a black stripe in the middle of the seats, that is pointing to various final venues: Buenos Aires, Berlin, 1966 Wembley, of course.
Absolutely. Well, what happened then? England is still living off that. It's about 95,000, something like that, the capacity, isn't it? I don't know, have you ever been inside it, Graham? You hadn't been inside it before in its previous incarnation. It's very steeply banked. We're very high up in our commentary point, but I mean, it's very impressive. Orange seats. It really is. It feels very special. And of course, it's got a historical, because it's the old FNB Stadium, isn't it, where Nelson Mandela had a rally just after he was released.
He did. He was there.
There's another nod to history.
He was there about 2 or 3 days after his release, and it was the primary rally that he had obviously in the Gauteng or in the old Johannesburg, Pretoria area. But what's really significant about Soccer City that people don't really know is it was built by the soccer people themselves. And the soccer people in 1988-87, when they first conceptualized the stadium, were obviously black-led, and in those days, under apartheid laws, black people could not own land in South Africa. And somehow they, with some proxy help from willing white people and some corporate help and a little bit of arm twisting from the bank, they managed to get this piece of ground from the city council to build the stadium. But it's the first black-owned, black-built, it was in those days in 1988, it was a real break against the strictures of apartheid. It's been a little bit forgotten, I think, in all of the fervour and the excitement ahead of this World Cup.
We've had a great decade, haven't we, with the World Cup for breaking new ground. I mean, Korea in Japan was terrific, wasn't it? It was very, very different. Then we had a sort of established powerhouse 4 years ago in Germany, which was a great World Cup and well run, and now Africa gets its first share.
Mark, I'm a big believer in fact, giving it out to it is called the World Cup. It's not called just for special countries or just for a few countries. So I really am in for this particular event here in South Africa, and I've mentioned it myself already. You just feel it coming through you, and quite honestly, I think, like you were saying about Korea, about Japan, that is part of the whole thing of bringing everybody in throughout and round the world, not just the recognised footballing countries.
One more question we're going to Ian Dennis, because we're expanding our vocabulary. Bafana. What does it mean? That's what they call the national team.
Bafana is a sort of a diminutive word for a boy. Come here, Bafana. Is a little bit of a diminutive as you call someone over, but with a little bit of affection as well. It was coined by a journalist. There's a tradition in this country in the old days. They don't do it anymore, of the journalist deciding on a nickname for a player. So they'd watch him for 1 or 2 games and they'd say Teenage, let's call him Teenage, or Ace. And when the news reports were written, you had his first name, Nelson, in brackets, Teenage Dudley, and that was the name that stuck. And reporters used to compete with each other to see who could get the funniest nickname. The best one I ever heard was a white goalkeeper called Mark Anderson, who they called Law and Order, because the Minister of Law and Order at the time was a very strict man, and it was in the real deep dark days of apartheid, and he was arresting people, and there were a lot of riots going on, and Mark Anderson kept saving goals, and because he was such a stout defender, he was white, he was named Law and Order, and those things came mostly from journalists and also a little bit from the fans, and journalists vied to nickname the national team as well. And it's a colleague of mine, Sibusiso Mseleku, who came up with the name Bafana. After a couple of weeks of the national team, and it really was popular, it stuck. There were other names, the Rainbow Warriors. People were competing with different names, but Bafana, as soon as it was out in the paper, it absolutely stuck.
Well, it's completely stuck. Everybody calls them Bafana. That's who we're going to be focusing on tomorrow, the build-up from Soccer City. I'll be presenting the programme from 1 o'clock. South Africa, Mexico is going to be a great opening ceremony, by the way. South Africa, Mexico from 3, followed by Uruguay, France at 7:30. And England, of course, in action on Saturday. Let's go northwest of here, about 70 miles away, to our senior football reporter, Ian Dennis, who's in Rustenburg with the England camp. Ian, good evening. After all the unfortunate excitement with Rio Ferdinand in the last week and Fabio Capello's